to provide the students with a foundation for their life and career. I would like to invite Dr. Bhimrai Mehri, Director, IIM Nagpur, himself a skilled academician, researcher, and leader in management training and education, to introduce our institute to our esteemed guest and set the stage for today's session.
Thank you, Anga. Thank you very much, respected Randeep Sudan ji, former bureaucrat, and currently he is the founder of Multiverz company at Singapore and currently located in Thailand for the assignment. I must say that we are fortunate to have today's guest. Randeep ji is not only a globally traveled, a great leader, great visionary, and action-oriented, I must say, a leader. When he was a principal secretary at Andhra Pradesh, during his time, Hyderabad was taken to the global city. Today, whatever the Hyderabad we consider as one of the greatest IT hub. So that Hyderabad, the then Chief Minister combined Andhra Chief Minister Chandrababu Naidu, during his regime, Randeep ji was the secretary and bureaucrat, and he took Hyderabad to the global level, and that is history. And today, all of you know what Hyderabad is today and what at that time. So that difference, that change. One person can change the world. Many times you have heard, but Randeep Sudan ji has changed the face of the Andhra Pradesh and particularly city Hyderabad, a small Hyderabad to a city of a global level and metro of India. And apart from that, he has played a significant role for setting up of ISB Hyderabad. So during the same time, Hyderabad was flying not only for IT but also a global business school, ISB Hyderabad, and afterwards he also served in World Bank in leadership capacity, and after serving many years as a bureaucrat, he decided to start his own, and then he started the Multiverz company in Singapore, and he has I must also say that he is a great global connect with every continent of the world. And of course, Randeep ji is a great friend of IIM Nagpur, and we are going to do many assignments and collaborations together a number of ways, and many of you are going to get benefit out of that. Global virtual projects and number of such assignments we have planned for you. And probably each one of you are again going to meet Randeep ji, and we are going to have many assignments. And globally, one business school in Tokyo, one in Australia, one in Russia, maybe another one in Canada or US. So all such business schools, 4 or 5 students coming together, doing a project, mentoring, and many great visionary ideas. And also he has, and also I must say that Randeep ji is a great sense maker. Future belongs to sense makers, and he is a great sense maker. And we are lucky to have, sir. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and addressing our young minds. I must say that these 204 section 250 and our students, they have chosen IIM Nagpur for their postgraduate destination. And these boys and girls, they are from 20 and odd states, and this time the majority of students are coming from Uttar Pradesh, and number 2 is Maharashtra, and number 3 belongs to Andhra Pradesh, and then Delhi and other cities will come. And these students, we have average experience, work experience is about 18 years, and 37% freshers, 21% engineers, and a great mix of 21% basically girls, and a great mix of engineering and non-engineering, and even a reasonably good number of non-engineers, we say about 25%. So this is a great combination, and I am sure the great diversity is there, not only different states and language and culture, but also from qualification wise and also background. And this particular batch is, I must say, it is a lucky batch of IIM Nagpur because they are going to be convocated from brand new campus of state of the art campus, which is coming up in Mian area of Nagpur, just 9 kilometers away from Nagpur International Airport and located in the heart of IT and art companies. And it is a multi-product special economic zone, and that is also first of its kind. And interesting, I think, Randeep ji, you know better than anybody else, Nagpur is the center of gravity of India, central point of India, and these all people decided to join the central point of India. And from there, they are emerging out to the different corporate world and playing their shots and climbing the ladders. So I think your insights and address and the way you have changed the game of Hyderabad and also and the global school in Hyderabad and also World Bank, the kind of shot you have played. I'm sure those insights and your advice is going to make a difference in the life of each one of them. With this, sir, I won't take much time, and we have talked many times. You know, I am Nagpur much better than many people here, including me. And since you have seen this part, so I will not take much time. And once again, I thank you very much for accepting the invitation. And I request you to address the batch. And before that, I request Anuga to, as a formality, give a brief introduction of today's keynote speaker, Randeep. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. It is my privilege to introduce our guest for this evening, Mr. Randeep Sudan. Although I couldn't do a better job than Dr. Maitri himself at the moment, I'd like to take the students through a brief overview of your professional journey. Mr. Randeep Sudan is an IIFT, JNU and LSE alumnus, as well as an IS officer who has played a crucial role in catapulting Hyderabad to the status of a prominent BPO hub and establishing the Indian School of Business in the city, as Dr. Maitri mentioned. He has been a key member of the leadership team that helped the state of Andhra Pradesh to make significant progress in e-government, founding and heading AP First, an agency recognized as a role model for IT investment promotion by McKinsey. After 24 years in the service, Mr. Sudan was associated with the World Bank as Global Advisor for Digital Strategy and Government Analytics, engaging with governments around the world on digital economy issues. In 2019, Mr. Sudan has founded Multiverz, a Singaporean social enterprise that uses data analytics and artificial intelligence to help governments, businesses, and individuals anticipate and navigate an uncertain future. Sir, it is customary at IIM Nagpur to honor our guests by planting a tree in their name to support tiger conservation as a token of our gratitude for your presence. I request Ravindra to display the tree plantation certificate in Mr. Sudan's name, please.
Well, thank you so much. This is excellent.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ravindra. And with this, I request Mr. Sudan to please deliver the keynote address for today.
So thank you very much. And I would like to particularly thank Dr. Maitri, with whom I've had the privilege of being associated very recently. But he is somebody who is a very inspirational leader and who has a great vision for IIM Nagpur. And I'm really lucky to be part of IIM Nagpur's journey and to be associated with all of you. So today, I would very much like to focus on the topic, which is preparing for a fluid world. The future is going to be highly uncertain and also problematic in many respects. So preparing for this world is therefore a pressing imperative. The future, with all its uncertainty and complexity, will pose many challenges for the younger generation. I will touch upon some of these challenges, including quite a few actually, including demographic shifts, climate change, economic stress, growing inequality, political instability, misinformation, conspiracy groups, rising militarization, nuclear hazards, the dangers of technology democratization, increasing surveillance, and the risk from artificial intelligence. So as you can see, this is quite a list. But I think that unless we really understand the challenges around us, it will be very difficult to face them. And especially when I think of challenges that the younger generation will have to face, I feel anxious with a sense of foreboding that we are entering a future that is likely to be dark and gloomy. People generally tend to be optimistic, but I think it is better to be realistic before being optimistic. So I'm not saying that everything will be dark and dreary, but I would like to focus on the real challenges that we are seeing all around us and see how we can address them as individuals, which may not be easy given the enormity of these challenges. Every 4 years, the National Intelligence Council in the US comes out with a trends report. The report's publication coincides with the election cycle for the office of the US president. The most recent report came out in March of 2021 and looks at a time horizon of 2040. The report focuses on some of the foundational shifts that are taking place worldwide, especially regarding demographics, the environment, economics, and technology. So let us begin with demographics. In the next 20 years, world population will grow by 1.4 billion to reach 9.2 billion. The fastest population growth is likely to be in sub-Saharan Africa, whose population will double by 2050. The urban population is expected to increase from 56% in 2020 to nearly 66% by 2040. 30% of the world's population will live in cities with a population of 1 million plus. During the last 20 years, roughly 1.2 billion people were lifted out of poverty and another 1.5 billion reached middle-class status. However, this remarkable achievement is expected to slow down in the years ahead. By 2027, India would have overtaken China to become the most populous country in the world. India will have to find jobs for more than 1 million new workers every single month. So the challenges before India in sheer demographics is not something which is trivial. Next, let us look at climate change. The world has warmed 1.1 degrees Celsius since the late 19th century. From the 1960s, every decade has been hotter than the previous one. In the next 20 years, global warming is likely to surpass 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is considered somewhat of a tipping point. No country will escape the physical effects of climate change, and developing countries will suffer more. We are likely to see changing precipitation patterns, rising temperatures, extreme weather events, and saltwater intrusion into our soil and water systems. The Washington Post ran a story on June 30th, which is just about a week ago, about the record temperatures in Canada. When people ask me that given climate change, which is a country, which is a good country to settle down, I used to tell them Canada. But just look at this. On 29th of June, British Columbia in Canada witnessed temperatures of 121 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 49.4 degrees Celsius. It is something which shocked and deeply concerned climate experts all over the world. If we look at last year in August, according to the US government's National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Death Valley is a place in Southern California and is supposed to be the hottest place on earth. It reached a temperature of 130 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 54.4 degrees Celsius. These are temperatures which are a cause for alarm. You look at what is happening on coral reefs. Coral reefs have already declined by 30 to 50%, and at 1.5 degrees Celsius could further reduce by 70 to 90%. And coral reefs are essential for sustaining plants, fish, animals in the sea. They also clean up the water and protect the coasts. So any damage to coral reefs portends a grim future. Now let's look at sea level rise. So since the late 19th century, the sea level has risen on an average of about 8 to 9 inches. It is estimated to rise between 3 and 14 inches in the next 20 years. So look at the time in terms of 19th century to now, and in the next 20 years. Now, potential future impacts of global climate change include more frequent forest fires, prolonged droughts in some regions, and a rise in the number, duration, and intensity of tropical storms. Warmer temperatures will also extend the range of disease-causing pathogens beyond tropical and subtropical areas, killing plants and animal species protected from disease previously. A 2013 study published in the journal Nature estimated that climate change and global warming could cause half of the plants and a third of animals to disappear by 2080. And as we all follow the news, we find that glaciers are shrinking, plant and animal species are shifting, and trees are blooming earlier. Just this year, cherry blossoms in Kyoto, Japan, bloomed much earlier than usual, based on records from Kyoto dating back to 812 AD, which is 1200 years ago. The peaking of cherry blossoms on March 26th was the earliest in more than 1200 years. Just imagine, what is happening all over the world. So Canada, Japan, you look at virtually countries across the world. We are witnessing mega fires, including those engulfing Australia, Western US, and vast forests in Siberia. Extreme fires destroyed more than 1.8 million hectares of bushland in Australia last year. 1.8 million hectares. That's a huge, huge amount of land. Research suggests that climate change has increased the risk of weather conditions, fueling fires by around 30%. So rising temperatures, increasing drought, and rampant deforestation has also resulted in the Brazilian Amazon releasing 20% more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere than it absorbed in the past decade. Whenever you think of the Amazon forest, you think those are the lungs for the planet and they absorb more carbon than they release. But over the last decade, the Brazilian Amazon forest released 20% more carbon dioxide than they absorbed. So even that is undergoing a dramatic change. A warming climate threatens snow on mountains, freshwater supplies, and hydropower affecting millions of people. Changes in climate and precipitation patterns will affect agriculture and, of course, food security. The World Food Programme expects that extreme weather events such as floods, droughts, forest fires, and tropical cyclones will damage farmland and threaten food security for millions of people. A paper by Jem Bendell, who is a professor of sustainable leadership at the University of Cumbria in the UK, that paper has achieved the cult status with Extinction Rebellion, which is a popular movement on climate change. The paper is titled Deep Adaptation, a Map for Navigating Climate Tragedy. And it is a depressing read. According to Professor Bendell, 17 of the 18 hottest years since records began in 1850 have occurred since the year 2000. Over the last decade, significant steps towards climate mitigation and adaptation have been taken. But these steps could now be compared to climbing a landslide. If the landslide had not already begun, taking faster and larger steps would get us to the top. Regrettably, the most recent climate data, emissions data, and information on the spread of carbon-intensive lifestyles all indicate that the landslide has begun. Because the point of no return cannot be determined until after the event, Ambitious work on reducing carbon emissions and extracting more from the air, both naturally and synthetically, is more critical than ever. Now, climate change is also getting into the realm of science fiction. So I recently started reading a science fiction novel on climate change, which is titled The Ministry for the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson. So I saw the reviews of this book and I thought, oh, I should read it. And when I started reading it, I realized that the book begins actually with a devastating heat wave in India. So the science fiction story on climate change starts with India. And I found that somewhat disturbing, while reading that book. And the advantage of reading science fiction and understanding what could potentially happen is that humans often have a difficult time envisioning a future that is fundamentally different from the present. So reading even a fictionalized account can make climate change feel more tangible, immediate, and familiar. Now, so much for climate change. Let's look at air pollution. Besides climate change, we have a problem of rising pollution, especially in India. For the third consecutive year in 2020, New Delhi was the world's most polluted capital, according to IQ Air. India was home to 35 of the world's 50 most polluted cities, according to IQ Air's 2020 World Air Quality Report. And that report analyzed data from 106 countries. According to the study, New Delhi's pollution level in 2020 was more than double the level in Beijing. I used to visit Beijing some years ago when I was working on a World Bank project in China. And there was a time when my flight was cancelled to Beijing because of the high pollution in the city, and it was causing low visibility for incoming flights. So when I used to visit Beijing, I never imagined that India would be facing something like this. But just imagine, the pollution level in Delhi last year was twice that in Beijing. Now, let us start looking at what is the economic situation globally. And if we look at the economic situation, it is also grim. Over 90% of the global economy saw a contraction in per capita GDP last year. The highest proportion of countries contracting concurrently since the Great Depression of 1930-32. The shock disrupted global value chains, restricted international mobility, and caused a decline in cross-country remittances. According to the IMF's April 2021 World Economic Outlook report, the global economy contracted by 3.5% in 2020, which actually translates to a 7% decline because there was a growth forecast of 3.4% growth for the year 2020 in October 29. While virtually every IMF-covered country experienced negative growth in 2020, the decline was more pronounced in the world's poorest regions. Argentina, Belize, Ecuador, and Suriname have all defaulted on their debt following COVID. Zambia defaulted last year in sub-Saharan Africa. Ethiopia and Chad are attempting to renegotiate their debt commitments. In aggregate, approximately half a dozen or so countries, including Sri Lanka, have dollar-denominated bonds, which are trading at yields greater than 10%, which is a sure sign of distress. In Colombia, when the government attempted to raise taxes to rein in a ballooning fiscal deficit and avert a credit rating downgrade, it sparked deadly street protests in May this year, killing at least 20 people and compelling policymakers to retreat. Last year, protests against police brutality in Lagos, Nigeria's business capital, morphed into a nationwide uprising against rising unemployment and food prices, which claimed at least 69 lives. Globally, fiscal support will reach nearly $16 trillion, $16 trillion, which is approximately 15% of global GDP in 2020, just 1 year. However, countries' capacity to implement such measures has varied considerably. The increase in the fiscal deficit in advanced economies was more than double that in emerging and middle income countries and 5 times that in lower income economies. The substantial discretionary fiscal support has resulted in a ballooning of government debt and a contraction in output and fiscal revenues. Corporate indebtedness has also increased as firms, particularly in the developing world, experience a sharp decline in sales. And these fiscal impacts will not be just limited to 2021. These will spill over to the next decade or the next decades. And so that's a cause for worry if you look at what's happening on the economy. And then we come to inequality. The world's richest 1% have more than twice as much wealth as 6.9 billion people. Billionaires own more wealth than 60% of the world's population, or 4.6 billion people. According to Oxfam, global billionaire wealth increased by 3.9 trillion between March and December of last year. By contrast, the International Labour Organization reports that global workers' combined earnings fell by 3.7 trillion as millions of people lost jobs worldwide. Verisk Maplecroft, which is a risk consulting firm, forecasts that a combination of increased debt and public outrage over the government response to the health crisis will result in an increase in political instability in at least 88 of the 130 countries that it monitors. And political instability is very much a phenomenon which we can see right away. The president of Haiti was assassinated earlier this week. Over 165 politicians have been assassinated in Brazil over the last 3 years, which is an average of 1 politician per week. We find a resurgence of right-wing extremist ideas and groups worldwide, from Brazil to the United States, Hungary to New Zealand. Over the last 2 decades, as the international community concentrated its efforts on Al-Qaeda and fighting Islamic State, right-wing extremism has spread in many countries across the world. Increased immigration from Muslim-majority countries and the mainstreaming of far-right ideas by populist politicians in response to this increase have contributed to a right-wing surge in Europe. For instance, in July of 2011, Anders Behring Breivik, a Norwegian far-right terrorist, killed 69 people in Oslo and Utøya Island. He described the need to defend Europe against Muslim domination and multiculturalism in his manifesto. Dylan Roof murdered 9 Black people in 2015 at South Carolina's historic Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. As with Breivik, he believed white people needed to be protected from the dangers posed by other groups like Jews, Latinos, and Black people. The deadly attack in Christchurch, New Zealand in 2019 demonstrated how right-wing extremism has continued to grow in popularity across the globe. Like Breivik, the Christchurch shooter, who specifically mentioned the Norwegian in his manifesto, referred to the importance of protecting white people of European ancestry from immigration, from Muslims, and from threats he characterized as amounting to white genocide. We also see a rise in right-wing politics. Viktor Orban was appointed Prime Minister of Hungary in 2010. He has expressed anti-refugee, anti-immigration sentiments throughout his tenure and argued that Europe was being absorbed by other cultures and groups, most notably Muslims. If you look at Brazil's President Bolsonaro, his rise to the Brazilian presidency in 2018-2019 demonstrated how right-wing extremist ideas have emerged. He campaigned on a platform of restoring Brazil's former glory through attacks on government institutions and minorities, and violence against criminals, activists, and opposition parties. Now, these political shifts, which are in a sense tectonic, are occasioned by disinformation and misinformation campaigns on social media as well. So if you look at social media, chat rooms, and websites, they are creating information bubbles and aiding anti-democratic ideas to spread quickly and reach audiences across national boundaries. The January 6th riot on Capitol Hill in the US and the global spread of false information and conspiracy theories about coronavirus are both examples of social media's perverse power. While Facebook is widely regarded as the primary channel for disseminating false information, messaging apps such as WhatsApp are viewed as a greater problem in parts of the global south, such as Brazil and Indonesia. Politicians and political leaders have also contributed to spreading false information about COVID-19. I'm not saying all politicians and all political leaders, but at least some of them. So this figure is highest in Brazil, where fact checkers identified nearly 900 false or inaccurate statements made by the president on the subject of coronavirus in 2020. Concern was also high in Poland, where the ruling Law and Justice Party has been accused of politicizing the pandemic. In the United States, Donald Trump initially suggested the virus would just go away. He downplayed the importance of mask wearing and then proposed research on injecting disinfectant as a possible cure. According to the Washington Post fact checkers, Trump made 30,573 false claims during his presidency, which averages about 21 false claims per day. The World Health Organization has even declared an infodemic. So we normally hear pandemic, an infodemic of misleading information about COVID-19, which poses a severe risk to public health. So the internet and social media have facilitated the evolution and spread of misinformation more quickly and more insidiously than ever before. In the 6 weeks preceding the 2016 presidential election in the US, research indicates that up to 25% of Americans visited a fake news website. According to a Facebook news analysis conducted around the same election, the top 20 fake news stories generated more engagement than the top 20 credible news stories from major news outlets. According to a similar study of content shared on Twitter, falsehood diffused significantly farther, faster, deeper, and more widely than truth in all categories of information. People are more likely to share fictitious content due to the novelty and strong emotional responses that it elicits. Bots have already infiltrated online political conversations. Before the 2016 US presidential election, 20% of all political tweets originated from accounts that were most likely bots. So automated tweets which are affecting the political discourse. And then you have the power of conspiracy. A prime example of this power of fake news is QAnon. QAnon functions as a hub for conspiracy theories, attaching itself to everything from anti-vaccine sentiments to climate change skepticism to mobilizing people and drawing them into larger conspiracies. It initially surfaced in 2018, and its central tenet is that the world order is controlled by a secretive deep state of democratic politicians and Hollywood celebrities who are embroiled in a global cannibalistic, satanic, pedophilic ring. And only Donald Trump stands in their way, having been chosen by the to the US presidency by military generals, including a senior intelligence officer who calls himself as Q. And these conspiracy theories have been surging on QAnon. Last year, we saw this surge both online and offline. And it started moving beyond the US into countries including the United Kingdom, Germany, Brazil, New Zealand, Japan, Italy, Finland, Russia, Romania, and even Indonesia. The gamification of conspiracy that QAnon promotes is critical to this process. It encourages followers to piece together the puzzle, so they put a puzzle out there. And then you have to research on that puzzle. And this gamification itself is drawing followers into QAnon's worldview. And this approach is similar to how terrorist cells or cults recruit new members. So we are seeing so many problems, which are actually becoming larger problems. Now, let me touch upon briefly on militarization, which is another troubling dimension. Global defense spending increased to US $1.83 trillion in 2020. Even when government budgets were taking a hit because of coronavirus and COVID, the defense spending increased by 3.9% in real terms in 2020. And this data is from the Military Balance 2021 report. 1.8383 trillion translates to about $2,486 for every single person who is living below $1.90 per day. So if you were to distribute this money to 736 million, poorest of the poor, each one would get something like $2,400 and odd dollars. The increase in defense spending occurred despite the pandemic caused by the coronavirus and the subsequent contraction of global economic output. While the US continued to spend the most on defense in 2020, accounting for 40%, but Asia is showing an upward trend. Asia used to spend 17.8% of the total global defense spend in 2010, but now it spends something like 25%. And China is the country which is driving this region's spending growth. The People Liberation Army goal is to develop into a world-class military by the end of 2049. And it announced this goal in 2017 when Xi Jinping announced that they would really modernize their military. So Beijing will seek to develop an army by mid-century that is on par or superior to the US or any other great power that China views as a threat. China is already ahead of the United States in several areas, including having the world's largest navy with an estimated 350 ships and submarines compared to the US's 293. China is ahead in land-based conventional ballistic and cruise missiles with ranges from 500 to 5,500 kilometers. China also has one of the largest forces of advanced long-range surface-to-air missiles in the world, consisting of Russian-built S-400s, S-300s, and indigenously produced systems. And I will come back to China a little bit more about other concerns that I have about China. Now, if we look at the nuclear issue, there are 9 countries in the world which possess nuclear weapons: the United States of America, Russia, China, France, the UK, of course, India, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea. There are nearly 4,000 ready-to-fire warheads in total, with an additional over 9,000 held in various stockpiles. Both Russia and the US have nuclear-capable missiles that can be launched anytime. Russia and United States each have approximately 900 warheads mounted on 300 missiles, ready to fire within minutes. Now, keeping missiles on launch on a warning status actually increases the likelihood that an error will occur and there might be an accidental nuclear launch. And this is not really something which is in the realm of fiction. It is something which can really happen. And I will share with you some examples of how close we came to a nuclear holocaust. And even, while there's so much of nuclear weaponry in the world, just last week, the Washington Post published that China is constructing over 100, actually, to be exact, 119 new intercontinental ballistic missile silos in a desert near the northwestern city of Yumen. And the construction marks a significant expansion of Beijing's nuclear capabilities. When there are so many nuclear weapons, mistakes can happen. On January 24th in 1961, a B-52 bomber was carrying 2 Mark 39 nuclear weapons. And for some reason, this B-52 bomber crashed near Goldsboro in North Carolina. So when it was crashing, it resulted in the release of 2 hydrogen bombs weighing between 3 and 4 megatons. One of the bombs fell straight down and slammed into a muddy field at a speed of 700 miles per hour. And the tail was discovered 20 feet beneath the surface. It came and hit with such an impact. The parachute of the second bomb opened. When these bombs are dropped and they get activated, their parachute opens. So that bomb actually got activated because of that crash. The parachute opened, indicating that the bomb's arming sequence had begun. Eventually, the bomb's parachute became lodged in a tree, and the weapon remained intact, but only for one reason. There are multiple switches, which need to work for the explosion to occur. The last switch did not work. It is just chance, sheer chance that that switch was defective and failed to activate. If it had, there would have been a thermonuclear explosion in the US, by their own sort of weaponry. Another example is what happened on September 26th in 1983. The Soviet Union's nuclear early warning system reported the launch of one intercontinental ballistic missile from bases in the US, followed by 4 additional missiles. Stanislav Petrov, who was a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces, he was assigned to that early warning systems command center. And when this alert went off, the protocol is that they should respond to this, this missile which has been launched at them. But he suspected, and that was just a hunch, that these missile attack warnings were false alarms for some reason. Rather than immediately relaying the warning up the chain of command, he chose to wait for corroborating evidence which never arrived. This decision is credited with averting a retaliatory nuclear attack against the US and its NATO allies, which would almost certainly have escalated into a full-fledged nuclear war. Subsequent investigation revealed that the satellite warning system had indeed malfunctioned. On January 25th in 1995, the Russian president, Boris Yeltsin, became the world's first leader in activating a nuclear briefcase. Both the US president and the Russian president, they have this nuclear briefcase which contains all the codes for activating nuclear strikes. And Boris Yeltsin became the first leader to actually activate the nuclear briefcase because the Russian radar systems detected a launch. And later they determined the launch was actually a Norwegian research rocket used to study the northern lights. It was not a nuclear attack. These are just a few examples. According to a document obtained through the Freedom of Information Act by Eric Schlosser, who's the author of Command and Control, a book of near nuclear disasters, over 1,000 nuclear weapon accidents occurred between 1950 and 1968 alone, for which information has been declassified. So in just 18 years, there were 1,000 nuclear weapon accidents. So just imagine, with so much of nuclear weaponry and this race to become more and more nuclear, the world is becoming a dangerous place, and that's for sure. The B-52 nuclear bombers were built between 1952 and 62, and those are the bombers still in service. The Minuteman III, which is US Army's primary land-based missile, was first deployed in 1970. And the infrastructure for these missiles is so old that the Minuteman launch complexes are still using 9-inch floppy disks. I think the MBA students here would not have perhaps seen a 9-inch floppy disk because they are too young for that. But I'm sure Dr. Maitri and I have lived through a time when we used to have those floppy disks. That is the sort of technology which is being used for the nuclear missiles which these countries are having and having to maintain. Now let's come next to the problems which are around us in the area of technology. So I recall a fascinating piece by Bill Joy, who wrote an article in the Wired magazine in April 2000. And Bill Joy is the guy who co-founded Sun Microsystems with Scott McNealy, Vinod Khosla, and Andy Bechtolsheim in 1982. And he served as the company's chief scientist and chief technology officer until 2003. So his piece in Wired magazine is titled, "Why the Future Doesn't Need Us." According to Bill Joy, as society and the problems it faces become more and more complex, and machines become more and more intelligent, people will delegate more decision-making to machines simply because machine-made decisions produce better results than human-made decisions. Eventually, the decisions required to keep the system running may become so complex that humans will be incapable of making them intelligently. At that point, the machines will be fully in control. and people will be unable to simply turn off the machines as they will be so reliant on them that doing so would be tantamount to suicide. So according to him, we have grown accustomed to almost routine scientific breakthroughs. We have yet to accept that the most compelling 21st century technologies such as robotics, genetic engineering, and nanotechnology pose a distinct threat from previous technologies. Robots, engineered organisms, and nanobots in particular share a dangerous amplifying factor. They are capable of self-replication. Genetics, nanotech, and robotics have the potential to create entirely new classes of accidents and abuses. Worse yet, for the first time in history, these accidents and abuses are widely accessible to individuals or small groups because of the democratization of technologies. Now, one particular technology makes engineering life forms nearly as simple as editing a Microsoft Word document. You must have all heard of CRISPR, gene editing, which was developed only a few years ago and uses the exact natural mechanism that bacteria use to trim and insert segments of genetic information from one genome into another. If you go to Amazon, you can actually buy a CRISPR genetic editing toolkit on Amazon. Just you can try it out yourself. And this technology is become so simple and low cost for editing DNA. And thousands of scientists worldwide are experimenting with CRISPR-based gene editing projects. And due to their low cost and ease of use, and regulations constrain very little of this research, mainly because regulators do not yet understand what has suddenly become possible. Already we are talking about COVID having emerged from the Wuhan lab, as a result of genetic modification. Just imagine the democratization of technologies like CRISPR and what risks it is increasing in the world. In 2019, I was invited to speak at the Skolkovo Forum in Russia. One of the invitees to the event was Nick Bostrom, who's the founding director of the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford University. So he was asked a question on surveillance. And coming from Oxford University and from the UK, and being Swedish, he's actually a Swedish person. I thought that he will give some reply that, oh, we should not have surveillance, or we should curtail surveillance, and we should put checks on surveillance. But I was actually surprised by his answer. So his answer was that certain fields, such as synthetic biology, may yield a breakthrough that democratizes mass destruction by enabling individuals to murder hundreds of millions of people using readily available materials. So civilization, just to survive, would require a system of ubiquitous, real-time, global, hyper surveillance to counter this. So in his view, this surveillance genie is out of the bottle. And just for humanity to survive, actually it may be required to have hyper surveillance, not just surveillance. And I will share with you some thoughts on surveillance, because this is going to be a problem in our lives going forward. And in the years to come, surveillance will become ubiquitous, no matter which country we are living in. Now, the coronavirus pandemic and the resulting need for rapid data on public health has paved the way for data collection and tracking on a scale which was previously unimaginable. Governments have tracked movement within the European Union using mobile phone data. Businesses have installed cameras equipped with artificial intelligence to monitor whether employees and customers adhere to social distancing rules. France has implemented facial recognition technology in public transportation to monitor mask use. China is already equipped with hundreds of millions of surveillance cameras. By one estimate, for a population of 1 billion plus, they have more than 700 million cameras. The Chinese government hopes to achieve soon complete video coverage of every single public area. Algorithms pass a large portion of the footage which is collected by these cameras for security threats of various types. AI can instantly identify every person who enters a public space by matching them to vast volumes of personal data. Algorithms will eventually connect data points from various sources, travel records, friends, associates, reading habits, and purchases to forecast even political resistance in advance. China's government is on the verge of establishing an unprecedented political stranglehold on their entire population, through this hyper surveillance. And China has recently embarked on several ambitious infrastructure projects abroad, including constructing mega cities and high-speed rail networks, and not to mention the Belt and Road Initiative. However, it is not these Belt and Road initiatives which will reshape history, but it will be China's digital infrastructure, which has the potential to shift the global balance of power between the individual and the state. And that's a worrying phenomenon. China's most prominent AI startups are SenseTime, CloudWalk, Megvii, Hikvision, iFlyTech, and Mea Pico. These are all active in the area of surveillance. SenseTime recently boasted that its software is capable of identifying individuals wearing masks. Hanwang, which is another Chinese company, claims that it can recognize anybody wearing a mask with 95% accuracy. Alibaba has, it comes from, its headquarters is Hangzhou, and it has a city brain project in that city. And it is one of the more well-known smart city initiatives in China. The AI system coordinates road signals initially for analyzing data from citywide traffic cameras. But the system is now being adopted by 23 cities across China, and it is being expanded. So it includes now not only transportation, but urban, government, culture, tourism, and health. And City Brain and its descendants will enable new forms of integrated surveillance. The feeds from City Brain could be combined with data from other urban areas to create a digital twin of nearly all human activity in China. Server farms located throughout China will soon be able to store multiple angles of high-definition footage, documenting every moment of every Chinese person's life. Just think about that. So China is developing turnkey national surveillance systems and selling them to countries with precarious or non-existent democracies. Autocrats are typically deposed either through coups or mass protests, both of which require a certain level of political organization. However, a large-scale political organization may be impossible in the future when societies are subjected to widespread automated surveillance. In the early 2000s, China's telecom company ZTE sold Ethiopia a wireless network that included a built-in backdoor for the government. Later in a crackdown, dissidents were rounded up and subjected to brutal interrogations, during which they were played audio recordings of their recent phone calls. Chinese-made surveillance networks are now being deployed in cities in Kenya, Uganda, and Mauritius. Chinese developers are interested in financing the construction of a new capital in Egypt. It will be powered by a smart city platform similar to City Brain. Zambia, which is in Southern Africa, has agreed to purchase more than 1 billion worth of telecom equipment from China, including internet surveillance technology. CloudWalk Technology, which is a Chinese-based startup supported by the Chinese Academy of Sciences, it signed a surveillance network agreement with the Zimbabwe government in 2018. Its terms require Harare to send images of its inhabitants back to CloudWalk's Chinese offices. The company can then train its algorithms to recognize dark-skinned people, which it was finding difficult earlier. So Chinese AI companies have established footholds in Asia, in Europe, in Africa, and are now expanding into Latin America. China contributed $240 million to Ecuador's purchase of a surveillance camera system. Bolivia has purchased surveillance equipment with assistance of a Beijing loan. Venezuela recently unveiled a new national identification card system, which stores citizens' political affiliations in a ZTE-developed database. So we are likely to see the proliferation of Chinese surveillance technology across many countries in the world, and others will start emulating this. And the net result will be a shrinking of space for democratic dialogue and political activism in the future. And then while artificial intelligence has given us multiple applications that are highly beneficial, it also poses grave risks. And some scholars have spoken about singularity, the point where AI overtakes human intelligence. Digital technologies have a certain advantage over biological systems, when it comes to intelligence. So biological neurons operate at a maximum frequency of approximately 200 hertz, which is more than 7 orders of magnitude slower than a modern microprocessor at 2 gigahertz. As a result, the human brain is forced to rely on massive parallelism and is incapable of performing any computation rapidly, which requires many sequential operations. Axons transmit action potentials at a maximum speed of 120 meters per second, whereas electronic processing cores can communicate at the speed of light, which is 300 million meters per second. The human brain contains slightly fewer than 100 billion neurons. In comparison, computer hardware can be scaled indefinitely up to extremely high physical limits. The human working memory can hold no more than 4 or 5 chunks of information at any given time. And human long-term memory is also limited. In fact, there are estimates that the total long-term memory of humans which is approximately 1 billion bits, is several orders of magnitude less than the storage capacity of a low-end smartphone. The amount of information stored and the speed at which it can be accessed in a machine brain can thus be significantly greater than in a biological brain. Biological neurons are also less reliable as compared to transistors. So while obviously digital systems are more capable, but computers fortunately are not there yet to achieve artificial general intelligence, which is what distinguishes human intelligence from computers. The challenge is complex as the human brain contains 86 billion brain cells or neurons, each connected to an average of 7,000 other neurons over synapses, and computer power today is insufficient to model an entire human brain at this level of connectivity. But there are human brain emulation projects which are being funded. For example, the European Union, one of its flagship projects is emulating the human brain. China, one of its elite research institutions has put in huge amounts of resources in emulating the human brain. Now, if you are able to emulate a human brain, a digital mind would benefit from significant advancements in software, including editability, duplicability, goal coordination, memory sharing, and new modules, modalities, and algorithms. According to Nick Bostrom's book, Superintelligence, it may happen at some point that as a system's capabilities continue to expand, it eventually might reach parity with the combined intellectual capacity of all humanity. Ultimately, if the system's capabilities continue to grow, it will achieve strong superintelligence, a level of intelligence vastly greater than the combined intellectual capabilities of all of humanity. At some point during this takeoff phase, the system may reach a point where it can continue to self-improve indefinitely. You already have software writing software. So just imagine the direction in which technology is going. The Chinese are investing heavily in AI, including, as I mentioned, brain emulation technologies. Chinese departments of computer science have gone all in on AI. 3 of the world's top 10 AI universities are now located in China in terms of research output. And the other day I was looking at the Times ranking of global universities. The topmost university in India is the Indian Institute of Science, and it does not rank even in the first 200, 300 universities in the world. So just look at that. The top 3 AI universities in the world are in China today. And this is before the Chinese are planning to construct 50 new AI research centers, which are mandated by President Xi's AI Innovation Action Plan for higher education institutions. If you look at equity investment, in 2017, Chinese companies attracted 36%, one third of all the investment going into AI was captured by China alone. The Chinese investments in 2015 was 3%. So just imagine, from 3% in 2015 to 36% in 2017, in just 2 years. In an interview with BBC in 2014, Stephen Hawking said that the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race. Elon Musk too has warned that AI could be worse than nukes. And according to a recent interview which Musk gave, he feels that AI will be vastly smarter than humans in less than 5 years. 5 years is not a long period of time. And he believes that at this point, things are likely to become unstable and strange. Those are his words. According to Yuval Harari, who's a brilliant guy who has written a few bestsellers, given the current rate of technological advancement, we may self-destruct in the event of an ecological or nuclear catastrophe. If we don't, the more likely scenario is that we will use bioengineering, machine learning, and artificial intelligence to either upgrade ourselves or create an entirely new kind of being that will take over. Now that scenario, with all this stuff which is going on Neuralink and, brain-controlled systems, this scenario poses some tricky ethical questions. Now let's look at the future of jobs. Given the rapid growth of AI and automation, we are likely to see significant disruptions in labor markets. The World Economic Forum estimates that by 2025, advances in robotics and artificial intelligence will result in the loss of 85 million jobs. And simultaneously, 97 million new jobs could be created, which is about 12 million net new jobs. Even if new jobs are created, the transition from jobs lost to emerging jobs will not be easy. Think of the transition from horse carriages to automobiles. The change was not a great story for the horses. A taxi driver displaced by an autonomous car cannot suddenly become a cybersecurity expert. Additionally, history demonstrates that technological advancement, it adds to income inequality by increasing the gap between those who lose jobs and those who gain new ones. And this is also likely to become a problem as we are going forward. And as labor markets get disrupted and AI and robotics and automation start making a difference. So as waves of new technology and new business models start washing on our shores, we will need to create a liquid workforce. A liquid workforce can be rapidly trained and reconfigured to meet market needs. Accenture first coined the term liquid workforce in 2016, and the company filed 4 patents for a liquid workforce platform in the US, Germany, and Australia. And individually, we may be doing our MBA today and looking for a future career. We will need to be prepared to change multiple jobs in the course of our lifetimes. The average number of jobs which many predict is going to be 12 jobs. One may have to change in the future ahead. So this whole concept of having a steady job, and lifelong employment is something which will not happen. That is, technology will ensure that it is something which will just not be possible. So I have given you a very sort of, dark and gloomy picture, right? I shared with you so many negatives which are happening all around us. So let me now start, focusing on a little bit of how we should be responding to this, right? So while there is so much of things which are going around us, what should we be doing, and where is the future possibly, having some ray of hope? So to some extent, I feel technology itself may be part of the solution. So you'd look at, for example, coding skills. In 2005, if you were to learn coding, it used to take about 800 days of learning. And this time has got reduced to about 80 days by 2015. And it is expected by 2025, you could learn coding in about 10 days. And this is partly because you are having new technologies which are going in the direction of no code, low code, so that itself is changing. Plus, the use of immersive technologies may also fast-track learning. For example, Walmart, it has embraced virtual reality for training workers. And it used to take about 8 hours to train workers for handling their VR, their pickup tower. So they have these pickup towers where customers can go and pick up orders which they have placed online. It used to take 8 hours. Now, using virtual reality, this takes approximately 15 minutes. So just imagine how learning can be expedited using technology. And in a world of digital twins, it may become easier to train people faster. Augmented reality may allow untrained workers to be remotely guided by software and expert supervisors to perform maintenance jobs, for example. So some years ago, when I was in Singapore, I visited the Accenture Innovation Hub. And using augmented reality glasses, I could locate a defective part in an oil rig and replace it with no prior training. So I feel that these type of approaches, which are based on extended reality, on immersive experiences, will become important as part of work. Even, I'm talking about workers, but even as a manager, the way that managers may have a meeting may not be like this over Zoom. It might be in a immersive 3D context. And there are a lot of technologies which are developing in that space, like spatial.io is one technology. And, Apple Glass is likely to come in the next 1 or 2 years. And there's a lot of work going on Oculus. So technology itself may actually bridge distances and make work done in a very different way. So coming specifically to MBA students, what are the skills that MBA students should acquire today to help them in a turbulent and fast-changing world? So that's an important question, which is there for each one of you, right? You must be thinking about that. So I feel that it will be essential to develop deep expertise in one or more disciplines, but some expertise in a wide range of domains. So we used to talk about acquiring T type of skills, deep expertise in one field and familiarity with a wide range of disciplines. Now, in preparing for the future, we may actually have to focus on acquiring M type of skills, not just T type of skills, M type of skills. Now, which means deep expertise in more than one discipline. And one of those deep, expertise should be in a technology discipline, because technology is becoming so fundamental. So no matter what your background, you may be, an arts graduate, but I feel that going forward, one of the legs on which skills will have to stand, if you have to future-proof yourself, will have to be a technology part. So not only having an M type of skill, but also having skills where you have knowledge over multiple disciplines, so that you can easily adapt and you can cross-pollinate ideas and you can work in a very different way. Now, this also means that competencies like communication, social and emotional skills will see growing importance in the future. Now, the next question is, how do we acquire these M type of skills? And this is something which I had a fascinating discussion with Dr. Maitri last time. How do we do this? So one idea, and this is just one idea among many ideas, is that, say, as a student, if you are connected with a company or with a government, and you try to identify what are the emerging issues that might represent a business opportunity or a risk for that company or for a government. And that opportunity or risk may be in the near, medium, or long term. So if somebody asks you that, I'm Larsen and Toubro, and I would like to understand what are the risks and opportunities which are emerging based on what you can see in the last 3 months, for example. I'm just taking an example. If you have to answer that question and identify those risks and opportunities, you will require knowledge that will cover multiple domains. So it will be essential to look at what are the geopolitical shifts that are taking place. So geopolitical, say if China invades Taiwan, it will have implications on semiconductors. What is the implication of that as a risk or opportunity for a company like L&T, for that matter? You will have to understand economic trends, obviously. Societal and cultural shifts. Need to look at technologies, where they are heading. What are the new patents which might have been filed in the last 3 months, which might impact L&T? You would have to look at legal and regulatory developments and what's happening on even things like climate change. And diverse perspectives will need to be synthesized and translated into business risks and opportunities. You may be required to undertake exercises which might be highly data intensive. You might look at databases because not everything can be read, and using Google search, and humanly it's not possible to pick up all the signals. It might be important to use analytics and use NLP, for example, natural language processing technologies. And it may also be important to reach out to external experts and to work within diverse teams and cross-cultural teams. So it just doesn't happen that you are working only with a set of Indian students. You may need to work cross-culturally, across geographies, to be able to synthesize and to be able to bring all these perspectives together to answer that simple question of what are the risks and opportunities which you see on the horizon based on what happened in the last 3 months. Just that simple question. So I feel that it might be of value to have this sort of structure formally introduced as part of work you do, or as part of the learning exercise. If you look at some universities like the University of Iowa, it has set up Iowa Electronic Markets, which is a prediction market, which essentially is trying to do this. You look at the University of Victoria in New Zealand, it has Predict It, which is doing exactly this. If you look at Georgetown University in the US, it has Foretell, which is again, the approach is similar. So we feel that if we have to be, as an Indian institution, if we have to be at the cutting edge, then we must also be doing stuff which engages us on problems which are current, which are real for companies and for governments, and do it in a manner which really broadens our horizons, connects us to the future, and makes us understand uncertainties in a much better way. Now, all this is fine. What I have told you about the risks, I told you about developing this M type of profile and how that might be potentially possible. But I think we need to go a little beyond this as well. So even more critical than acquiring skills is actually to reflect on a fundamental question. So there is this famous professor who's unfortunately no more, Clayton Christensen, who talked about disruption. He was in the Harvard Business School. And he wrote a book whose title was, How Will You Measure Your Life? I think that is a very, very important question. Now, this professor, when he was a Rhodes Scholar, so at some point he was in Oxford. And he says that he was caught up in, doing his student assignments and spending time. But he decided to take time off and think about this question, that what really is it that provides meaning to my life? How will I measure my life? And he says this he did as a student, right? So he, of course, became a very renowned professor eventually. But he said that experience of thinking about how I will measure my life was one of the most important things that he did in his entire life. And that is something which I would urge students to think about it, that what exactly is important and what should be your lodestar, what should be the North Star, which, should be something where you are anchored, which steadies you in an otherwise turbulent and uncertain world. So that's one thought that I thought I should share with you. There's also this famous Harvard study of adult development, where, they took the class of 1938 and they started looking at this class as they, transition through life. And it is the longest standing longitudinal study on how to live a healthy and happy life. And after more than 80 years of following these people, from that class of 1938, and some of those people became very famous, they also became presidents in the US. The result that they discovered was ultimately It is close relationships, not money or celebrity, that contributes to people's happiness throughout their lives. These are connections, relationships are connections that insulate people from life's disappointments. They delay mental and physical decline and are a more accurate predictor of long and happy lives than social class, intelligence, or even genes, for that matter. There's another interesting study by Adam Grant, a professor from the Wharton Business School, who studied success in the context of people who give and people who take. Adam Grant's book, Give and Take, it shows through research that givers are likely to be more successful than takers. By developing stronger reputations and more valuable networks and relationships, givers tend to become more successful at the end of the day. So that's, again, an interesting insight. Adam Grant, by the way, recently wrote another book, which came out only this year, titled Think Again, The Importance of Knowing What You Don't Know. So each person, we have some cognitive tools and we have accumulated knowledge and we rely on that every day. However, we need to examine and question this knowledge. We need to have the ability to question our beliefs, our assumptions, our opinions and prejudices. And that is something which also can avoid errors and can help you to learn and to grow. And it is something which is really very important as a capability going forward. And this is also what is called as the scientific method, right? You just don't take anything for granted. You really think about it, reflect on it, and try to be objective to the extent you can. Now, I would like to finally share with you one of my favorite books. And that book is a book which is a very short book. It is titled 4 Agreements, and it is written by Don Miguel Ruiz. So this book captures the wisdom of the Toltecs. Now, between the 10th and the mid-12th centuries, the Toltec civilization flourished in ancient Mexico. And this book captures their insights into life and living. And the 4 agreements, I wish I had read this book, when I was a student like you. It would have been very useful for me throughout my life because it says something which is very simple, not too complicated, but it is very, very wise, what they say. So the 4 agreements are, first agreement is that you should be careful with your words. Speak with integrity. Say what you mean. Avoid using words to speak against yourself. Don't be too self-critical either. And gossip about others. And use the power of your words in the direction of truth and in the direction of love. So have positive when you speak, be positive in your speech. First agreement. The second agreement is don't take anything personally. This is really important. Nothing that others do is because of you. So somebody might criticize you, somebody may, make fun of you, whatever. Never take it personally, because what others say and do is a projection of their reality. It does not reflect on you in any way. So don't, be above that, not to take anything personally. When you are immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering. The third agreement is actually what Adam Grant's book is all about, Think Again, which is don't make assumptions. Find the courage to ask questions and to express what you want and communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings and sadness and drama. And the last agreement is also very important. It says, and finally, always do your best. Your best will change from moment to moment. It will be different when you are healthy as opposed to when you are sick. Under any circumstance, simply do your best and you will avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. I have also been deeply impressed by a short story by Leo Tolstoy, which is titled The 3 Questions. I'm sure many of you might have read it actually. But it is the story about a king who wanted to answer the following 3 questions. What is the right time to begin something? When should I begin something? Which people should I listen to? And what is the most important thing? So 3 questions. And he ultimately got his answer. The story is very interesting, but I'm cutting it short to reach the final conclusion. And he reached a wise man who told him that keep in mind that there is only one time that matters, and that time is now. It is critical because it is the only time we have any ability to act. The most critical person is the one with whom you are currently conversing, as no one knows what will happen in the future or whether we will meet anyone else. And the most critical task is to do that person good, as we are all sent into this world for that sole purpose. So I would like to leave you with a final thought that I have adapted from a book, which is not a book on philosophy. It's actually a book on the Singapore story on digital development called Dynamic Governance by Boon Seong Nyo and Geraldine Chen. But I have adapted something in that book. And what I would like to leave you as a final thought is then whatever you do, always think ahead, think across, and think again. So think ahead, think across, and think again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. While the speech sounded gloomy, but I think it is as close as to the reality as we can discuss here. I am Papi Reddy. I'm a faculty at IIM Nagpur. Anyway, so while the questions keep coming in, I have a few from me. I'll just pose the first one. So, I mean, you are talking about so many threats to human as if we just look at the human. So, but if we take our daily living, we have so many attacks on us. I mean, be it attack on my opinions, be it an attack on my beliefs, be it an attack on the way I live, the way I stay, and so on and so forth. So how should one individual react in such a situation? I mean, yes, we need to be on guard, but how many fights can I fight in a day?
Right. That's a very nice question, actually. So I think I answered that question when I was talking about the 4 agreements, right?
Yeah.
So I did mention that when you are having to deal with opinions, beliefs, or stuff which is negative in your life. So I think there are 2 things which one needs to do consciously, and it is difficult. I can assure you it's not easy. The 2 things is, number 1 is to separate yourself from what is happening. So, in a sense, look at it as a passive observer. So put yourself not emotionally immersed in that conversation, but take yourself out of that conversation. So assume that you are looking at it as a third person objectively. That's one. Secondly, as I mentioned, don't take anything personally. Nothing is personal. And sometimes, one may experience a negative thing, which is actually positive. I'll give you an example. I used to work in the Washington, D.C. office of the World Bank on 18th Street. One day I came out of my office. I wanted to go to a place called Friendship Heights. And I hailed a taxi. And the taxi happened to be a Sardarji, a Sikh guy. And I originally come from Punjab. I know Punjabi is my mother tongue. So I spoke to that taxi driver in Punjabi. I told him that I would like to go to this Friendship Heights. And he said, no problem. And he started. Now, after he had gone about 5 minutes of driving, and I was talking to him, so I was not very observant. I realized that when taxi starts, you're supposed to put the meter down. And this guy did not put his meter down. So my first thought, and I asked him, I said, what, your meter is not down. He said, don't worry, sir, you can pay me whatever you want. So I said, no, that is not the way, I would like to pay by meter. So why don't you put the meter down? He said, no, sir, you pay me whatever. Now, my entire thought process was actually very negative. I thought that he is trying to extract more money from me. And this is a way of doing that because he has not put his meter and he is saying you pay me whatever. So he's thinking that if it costs $30, I'll eventually pay him 50 or something like that. So that ride was spoiled by these, stereotypes which were playing in my mind. So I reached Friendship Heights And I thought that, I should normally pay him about $30, but okay, let me pay more, $40 I pay. So I took out $40 and I was paying him. He said, no, sir. I decided the moment you sat down in my taxi and the first words you spoke to me in Punjabi, I decided I will not take any money from you. Now, just look at that. That means my stereotype, my assumption about this guy, and my experience about what happened was completely the opposite of what that guy's intentions were. So many times in life, it happens that way. So I feel that one needs to put oneself out of that situation as a third person and look at things objectively and assume the best, and don't take anything personally. That's the only philosophical way that I can address your question, because it's at a deep level, this question that you asked.
Okay, so we have a question from a student. Sir, as you said that you don't take it personally, but the time we start not taking anything personally, that is the time my ambition and passion diminishes. Like if I didn't took personally on my friends getting a great miles, I would not have studied hard and achieved something as good as I am and start getting good achievements for my life. So should I or should not I take personally?
Yeah, so now this question is about ambition in life. It's not about personally, because that is it does not really matter whether you're taking this personally or not. The issue is about ambition. Should you be ambitious and competitive? And to be honest, when I was a student, I was very ambitious and very competitive. So in the first year of my graduation, I topped the Punjab University at that time. And the second year, I came fourth. Of course, I got my paper reevaluated and my position was restored. But between the time that I was fourth and not first, I led a miserable life. Miserable. I can vouch for it because it was my personal experience. I was so competitive. But if you look at life, right, I don't think this ambition and being competitive really takes you very far, to be honest. You look at who are the most successful guys, right? You look at, for example, who's the boss of Microsoft? Satya Nadella, did he get into IIT, by the way? He never got into IIT. He got into MIT. MIT is not the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It is the Manipal Institute of Technology. And he is today the boss of Microsoft. He can hire any guy from IIT. And he's their big boss. In fact, an IIT entrant into Microsoft will find it very difficult to find time to meet with him. So how does that ambition really help? I feel that you need to think deeply about the purpose of your life and how you can do good for others and for society and for, have a broader vision and a broader purpose in life. Because as soon as your purpose is to get the best grade, I think you're limiting yourself. So that is what the experience is. So don't be so competitive, and you will realize this. I have been very competitive. I did really well in my academics. I went to the London School of Economics and all that. And ultimately, at the end of the day, after so many years of experience, I feel that it is just not worth it. You need to have a higher purpose in life, which is why I actually started this company. I left the World Bank and a very attractive salary which World Bank pays, because one would like to do something which can really move the needle as far as large number of people are concerned. So my company is not just a profit enterprise, it's a social impact enterprise. And that's the reason that I left the World Bank. So I have, this is my perspective. It is a very different perspective from what students might have, but I have gone through that phase.
Okay, sir. One last question we'll take.
Yes.
How do we, how do we give individuals strength to regulate themselves if our businesses encourage impulse? In the sense, as you said, regulators are not catching up with the technology. So we need regulators, but people who consume the technology, they have to regulate themselves. Is that a product which I should consume or not? In that sense, how do we get that strength?
So there are multiple approaches to doing this. I am working with, for example, the Saudi government currently, and we are looking at something called anticipatory government. So, which means that because technology is always ahead of the game and regulation is trying to catch up, so the only way for regulation to be in sync with technology is to work with technology companies, with startups, with companies with new technologies, and co-create regulation so that you are in it together. And that's an approach which the UK's Financial Controlling Authority, FCA, started as a sandbox. And then, Singapore has taken it, and a lot of countries are using regulatory sandboxes. But using AI and using anticipatory regulation is something which is a new discipline which is emerging, and OECD is doing a lot of work on that. Just last year, they published a report which is called Anticipatory Innovation Governance, and that's the name of the report. That's one way. As far as individuals are concerned, I feel that the direction will be different. In a technology world, data will be fundamental, right? So data is what will drive business models and will drive the direction of technology. Now, when it comes to data, I feel that there is new models which are emerging, which are data trusts, data cooperatives, and data pools, where individuals can actually join together and have more control over the data. And to that extent, they can monetize that control and also influence the decision of big tech. And this is happening because if you look at, for example, the drivers union, you have these Uber and you have these ride-hailing apps. In the Netherlands, or rather in the European Union, the GDPR Article 15 of the General Data Protection Act, it says that you can access data, you can ask for data from whoever owns that data about you personally. So this drivers union, which is a Uber drivers union, has asked for data on their drivers and has taken that data and put it in a data trust. So there's a workers' information exchange, which is a data trust where this data is kept. So I feel that eventually we will get to models where data, which is the driving force of technology and big technology today and of AI, will become democratized by these type of new models emerging. And one of the guys who's quite active in this space is Alex Pentland, who's a professor in MIT. He's written a new book also, New Economy. And so that's the direction to go. So my answer is twofold. One is on the individual side, that we are likely to go in a data direction. And one is on the government side, where we are likely to go in the direction of anticipatory government.
Okay, sure, sir. Thank you so much. And I promise that we'll try to live with those 4 agreements. Over to you, Anaga.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I enjoyed my discussion with you and presenting to you.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of IIM Nagpur, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our guest for today, Mr. Sudan, for this very insightful session full of significant perspectives for our students. I thank Dr. Bhimrai Maitri, Director IIM Nagpur, for his constant encouragement and guidance, Professor E.R. Papi Reddy, Faculty Coordinator for the event, Professor Prakash Awasthi, PGP Chairperson, IIMN CEO, Lieutenant Colonel M.B. Alur, and the PGP IT and Directors Offices for the able support, as well as the PGP student body, all of whom have contributed in making this event a success. Thank you very much. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It was a great, I think, amazing session with full of data and full of futuristic view and great sense making. I am sure this session will be always memorable to all my boys and girls and faculty.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Maitri, for giving me the opportunity. Take care. All the best.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks.